Though everybody has been writing her off, I'm telling you, she's going to win again. And she's joining us now. Congresswoman Comstock, great to have you.
Good morning. Great to be with you.
So, Barbara, where were you on 9/11 that morning, 10 o'clock? What do you remember about it?
Oh, gosh, we all remember where we were. You know, I had actually been in New York City the day before for a conference that was supposed to go into a second day. It was right down by the Trade Center at New York University. And I decided to come home for a friend's birthday this night of September 10th instead. So I was home. I hadn't headed out to work yet. One of the things I always did, called my friend Barbara Olson. When I saw the second plane hit, certainly thought this terrorism, called her, and I didn't, I just talked to her on that Sunday. I didn't know she wasn't, she was intending to leave and go out of town. And then as I was calling family members, my son actually was down. He went to Gonzaga High School then, one of my boys, the other was at college, but he had headed, I called him and said he was still on the way to school because he had slept in and gotten there late. And I said, turn around, come home, this is terrorism. He laughed at me, Mom, you're crazy, and continued to go down to school. So he was down on Capitol. So it was a very frightening day as all of the events unfold. We remember that sickening feeling that we had as we saw the towers fall, as we heard the unspeakable number of people who had perished that day. And, I think the resolve of everyone coming together, that was when I remember Donna Brazil calling me the next day and saying, whatever we need to do, we're together. And we had worked across each other, opposite each other in the 2000 campaign. She knew Barbara Olson. And I know, and there were so many people in my district who lost loved ones. My son had a mom who was one of the flight attendants on one of the planes. And so it was really an overwhelming day, and it's something we, never forget, as we say.
Do you remember what you said to your children that night? Because you got to go back 17 years ago. Your children were much younger then. Do you remember, making a speech to them at home that night?
Well, that night, we were, we spent a lot of time with Ted Olson. We were over at his house, so I was going back and forth between my home, where my husband was with the children, and we were together talking to them. We certainly talked to my son who was at college, let him know everyone was okay. My husband was a teacher, so he was out in Virginia at his school, so he was dealing with a lot of children who were very upset. I was trying to get my son, even though the school who was down at Gonzaga by the Capitol, they were all telling the kids don't go anywhere, but he and his friend ditched out and drove home. Mm-hmm. My daughter, who was in 8th grade then, I went and picked her up and brought her home. So we were kind of all there together talking about what happened. I don't, it was also new. Terrorism was not something on my list of issues that I had ever worked on. A few months later, I was at the Justice Department, and I headed up public affairs there while we were, unfortunately, learning the names and all of the operatives and how they operated, and learned things like my friend Barbara, and I think there was one other person who was on one of the planes, in the phone calls that they were able to make, were able to give enough information about the terrorists that they knew about the box cutters. That was something that they were able to relay. And she'd been a prosecutor, and she was somebody who, she made 2 phone calls to her husband at the Justice Department that morning. And she was relaying, factual information, running through that while he had to, unfortunately, and just imagine the horror of having to relay to your wife what had happened with the other 2 planes, and now what was likely to happen to her. So, they were saying their goodbyes and, talking to each other as husband and wife while she was relaying, prosecutorial and factual information that, she would hope would save somebody else's lives, and most unmistakably did. And I think, you saw the people who fought back on the Pennsylvania flight once they knew what had happened. And Barbara's plane didn't have as much time or didn't have the information soon enough. I mean, when Ted was talking to her, the phone went dead, and, she was telling him that they were flying, over the Potomac. And then when the phone went dead, shortly thereafter, he could see that the Pentagon had been hit. So he knew that must be her plane. But the others did fight back. You saw the soldiers, on that plane that day, the first, responders who were doing what Americans do, which is come together and say this isn't going to happen here. And that plane would have hit the White House or the Capitol, one of the intended targets. And we know they still want to come back and do that, which is why, a whole generation has fought overseas so that we don't have that ever come here again. And I'm proud of all of our people who have done it, our soldiers and men and women who have fought, lost their lives, injured, our first responders that day, many who have died of cancer because of the exposure they had those days to, at the 9/11 site. Mm-hmm. And I'm happy we have passed finally a cancer registry bill so that our first responders will get the information they need. But it is tragic how many have lost their lives since 9/11.
Yes, it is, Barbara, and I really appreciate your sharing that story with our listeners. Thank you. Today we're with Barbara Comstock, Republican Congresswoman, 10th District of Virginia. The Democrats saying she's going to lose. I'm saying she's going to win. And as usual on this type of stuff, I'm always right. Barbara, let's get to the Palestinian situation yesterday. It's kind of a big deal. John Bolton making the speech says he wants out of the ICC, that this is a globalist world tribunal that will trample on U.S. sovereignty. He says we never signed the agreement. President Clinton signed it. George Bush unsigned it. Senate never ratified it. And now we've also closed the Palestinian liaison office in Washington, D.C. What is your take first on John Bolton's speech yesterday?
Well, I appreciate his remarks, and I think we have right now a great team that the president has put together that is responding on the world stage, that has experience and depth and understanding of these issues. And I am happy that in Congress we have provided all of the tools necessary, and we've provided the support for, getting out of the Iran deal, that wasn't working. And now, what we'll need to do here. So, I'm confident that we have the teams that, we can deal with this as we go forward. But, this is going to be a challenge. But I think that when you look at what's going on in the Mideast, we have, fought back ISIS. We have, really made the situation more stable, and we are doing that throughout the world. When you look at North Korea, we're at least having conversations now, but it's also that having that support for our military and rebuilding our military that I think enables our leaders, the President, Secretary of State, Ambassador Bolton, to be able to take a strong stance for the United States and to get our allies to rally with us.
Barbara, do you believe that we should not be beholden to anything that the ICC says? They say they're launching an investigation against crimes that the Israelis are committing on the West Bank and also the U.S. jails and troops in Afghanistan. Do you agree with John Bolton that the International Criminal Court, the ICC, has no jurisdiction in the United States?
Well, Yes, I agree, but I think we also have to do what is in the best interest of the United States. So, yes.
Okay. So you're in favor of that. Barbara, final question I've got here. Do you see any hope for a resolution of the Israeli-Palestine situation? I mean, can you see, in a minute and a half, can you see this ever being resolved? I know the Trump administration through Jared Kushner says they have this grand plan. Nobody knows what it is. Can you ever see the President Abbas coming to the table and maybe getting something worked out?
Wow. Well, that's an easy one, John. Well, listen, our relationship with Israel is our most important, one of our most important allies and our most important ally in the region. And by having that relationship strong and having our military strong is always the best way for us to be able to bring people to the table and have our allies work with us for that. So, obviously many administrations have sought that for years. It is, the most challenging in the world. But as Ronald Reagan said, an America that isn't strong, makes for a dangerous world. So the stronger we are, the stronger position we are in militarily, and our resolve to support our allies like Israel, I think that puts us in a better position, whether it's dealing with the Palestinians or dealing with North Korea or dealing with ISIS.
Okay, we're out of time. I want to thank Congresswoman Barbara Comstock for being with us. More information, go to BarbaraComstockForCongress.com.